Think back to your college years and the people you knew peripherally. I mean, not your best or even good friends, but the people you might have had a class or two with, so you knew them like that. What are they doing today? Got any idea? Well, I knew a kid in college named Carter. He seemed smart and pretty clever, but he wasn't an actor, so I didn't pay him much mind. And then 30 or so years passed, and we reconnected. It turns out Carter has had one of those careers that makes you sit up and pay some real attention.
But you can't beat Jack and Kathy. You can't beat the story. And we had so many of those stories. Both Jack and Kathy on the one end, and then we had people who literally recorded television commercials in their hospital bed in their final weeks, dying because of their smoking. And so at the end of the day, we win those fights because we're persistent and because we have better stories. And it takes decades sometimes to win the fights.
Welcome to Brave Middle Ground, where curiosity meets courage. I'm Dayna Del Val, and here we're exploring the spaces between isolation and connection, division and unity. We'll reclaim the middle ground, one brave step at a time, starting right now. Carter Headrick, welcome to Brave Middle Ground.
It is great to be here, Dayna. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, thanks for saying yes. We had a chance to talk just really quickly before I hit record, but you are one of the very few people I knew, and I'm putting that in air quotes because I didn't know you all that well, but you did not get a theater degree from our time together in college, and you are really one of the few people who I even turned my gaze toward for half a second and got to know because of one class with an infamous MSUM professor named Dr. Andrew Conte. But it's pretty exceptional that I knew you in this very brief moment, and then we lost touch for 30-ish years, and then had this opportunity this spring to come back. So before we go into the, long lost way back whens, let's start with my first question to everyone, and then we'll no doubt go down memory lane and go look forward as well. But Carter, from your perspective, however you want to define that, what does middle ground mean to you?
For me, middle ground means finding a space where we share values, right? So it's, I think, and we'll talk a lot about this, I hope today, but I think it really is about finding that space of shared values. I can disagree with someone on most things, but in almost all cases, I can find some shared values that I hold. And it won't be all values in any sense of the word, but there's got to be, there's almost always some value that I hold that other people hold. And if we can find that moment and that value, then we can find middle ground and we can connect.
Do you think that's really possible today to find a shared value with almost anybody?
I do. I really do. And I think, we live in this very divisive time. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult sometimes to see past the values where we disagree, because when you disagree on values, that's a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes those values are so personal and so tightly held that it's tough to get past. And you don't have to get past forever. You don't have to get past, but you can, I think, for a moment, find middle ground with someone and work with someone if you do find that shared value space. It's really interesting. I was reading the transcript of an interview with the president that was done last weekend, and the reporters were just so masterful in both finding a little bit of common ground and then asking really tough questions, right? But they always came back and found a touch point that they could hit that was common ground with the president. And even if the touch point was, boy, you really criticized me on Twitter or really criticized me on Truth Social, whatever the case may be, even if that was the touch point, they would go back to that point where they had an interaction and use that as a jumping off point for the next question. It was really interesting, kind of a masterfully done bit of give and take to keep what could have been a very hostile interview um, within the bounds where people were generally respectful.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to force your hand here, but were his responses as intentional?
That's a really good question. I don't know if he was as intentional in finding middle ground, but he was definitely kept in the conversation,
Okay, well, that's
right?
more than
And he
sometimes happens with him.
sure, and he didn't seem to mind. The other interesting thing about the transcript is he didn't seem to mind pushback.
Oh, that is interesting.
As long as people would say, I really disagree with you on this, and he didn't seem to mind that as long as they kept finding these touch points, which was really interesting.
Okay, so you run a company called Carter Headrick Strategic Communication. This feels to
Yes.
me like a very strategic communication tactic we're talking about, which is just to sort of layman's term this, take someone who's got a substantial ego, take someone who's got extraordinary power, and don't road grade over them because that isn't going to
Right.
get anybody anywhere. You
Sure.
have to stoke that ego. You have to, pay some due respect to the position, all those things.
Sure.
But you also have to hold someone accountable for
Yes.
words and actions.
Yes.
So, talk to me, Carter, about from a strategic communication expert position, which you are in, what is the state of communications these days generally?
Yeah. It's a really tough state, generally. And what has happened, I want to just take a step back for a moment because I've learned a lot about what is effective at motivating people over the years. What kind of communication is effective at motivating people? And one of the things that we've learned is that fear is the prime motivator. If you want someone to do something, scare them. Tell them they're at risk, and they will do something to respond. If you tell someone good news, if you tell someone happy news, they're far less likely to respond. They most likely won't respond. And so we've lived in this ecosystem where people wanting to motivate us to donate money, to take an action, to do something for years have been, and on both sides have been telling us that we need to be afraid. And that if we just take this action, if we just donate this money, then they will eliminate the fear for us. Right. And if you think about that, that's been going on for decades. What's different today than it was in the past is that today we live in these very micro communities online, right? And everything is personalized, right? You see news sites talking about personalizing the news that you see. If I go and look, I look every morning at The Athletic, and they have headlines personalized for me. ESPN, same thing, headlines personalized for me. The New York Times, the Washington Post, they're feeding me information that's personalized for me. And that personalization means I'm not seeing a lot of other stuff that may help me have a better understanding of the world. And in the past, we were able to break out of the fear and the fear mongering because there weren't that many sources and it wasn't personalized, right? Walter Cronkite on the CBS Evening News was where most Americans got their news. And so it gave us a common platform. And we don't have that anymore. So that's really tough. That's really tough to do. And it makes the state of communication today a little more difficult to find common ground.
Carter, can you imagine? Let's go back to 1995. Can you even fathom the evolution of what's going to happen over the next 30 years?
No, no, not,
I
and
mean,
not even 1995.
probably
In 2 years after
2005,
that,
maybe.
but even so, 2 years after 1995, in 1997, I was interviewing for a job, and one of the questions that they asked me was, "We tend to use email a lot in this job. Are you comfortable with email?"
Hmm.
Right? And so that's 1997, and yesterday I was reading an article about email being dead. you know.
Yeah.
And so the technological change has just been incredible. I
Yeah.
remember Bill Gates talking about you'll have a computer in your pocket,
Hmm.
and now we all do,
Hmm. Yes, we
right?
all do. You see
Yeah,
pictures of the developing world. They don't have internal plumbing, but they've
right.
got cell phones. I mean, it's
Sure. Yep.
inconceivable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so no, you couldn't fathom it. I mean, we had no idea what that would look like.
Yeah. Do you think it has been, I'm sorry to make this a binary question, but do you think it has been largely better or worse, this evolution?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it was pitched to us, right? If you remember, to go back to that Bill Gates example where he said everyone's going to have a little computer in their pocket. He also said we'll be so much more productive that we'll work 4-day weeks, and we'll have all this extra time. Um, and I don't think most of us are feeling like we have all this extra time available to ourselves. But I don't know personally if I think it's better or worse. I think that we deal with the technology we live with.
Mm,
And I
sure.
think you go back and look at my grandparents, and they were worried about the influence of the radio.
Hmm.
Actually, go back. I'm reading a book right now about the start of the Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln and the politicians of that time were really worried about the speed with which news would travel because of a new thing called the telegraph. And
Telegraph.
yeah, right. And so the technology that was evil and worried about in 1961 or in 1861 was the telegraph. And
Hmm.
then it was the radio, and then it was the TV. And, it keeps evolving. We keep worrying about it, but the worrying is legitimate, and there are definitely concerns with it, but it is here, and we are going to have to deal with it.
So, how do you deal with it now as the head of a communication strategy company who's not just sort of working out of your, third bedroom
Yeah.
running little programs? You're doing serious national and international work. How do you deal with the opportunities and the challenges to how we communicate today?
Well, I think the first thing is I don't have a position where I talk to everyone, and I don't try to talk to everyone. So I've always got a defined audience. And that audience sometimes is big. Um, there were a few years back around 2007, or about 2005, 2006, where I was talking to 400,000 people on a weekly basis, right? And today my audiences are generally much smaller than that. But it's really understanding who your audience is and how to connect with them. And so if I'm working with a nonprofit like the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, something like that, it's understanding who those volunteers are and how to best connect with those volunteers, so that I can deliver a message that they'll hear, right? And so I think if you think about this, the most important thing to do is understand your audience. And then once you understand your audience, you need to be able to frame the discussion in a way that they will understand it. And Republicans are really good at framing. They do it so well. They say, we need tax reform, right? And the tax reform idea sticks. And all of a sudden, we're having a discussion about what kind of tax reform we need, because the Democrats adopt the Republican frame.
Mm-hmm.
And they do this all
Mm-hmm.
the time. It happens
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And when that happens, if you're working in a frame that you believe in, you're great. That's important because then people will hear you the way you want to be heard. If you're working in a frame you don't believe in, it's horrible because people will hear you in a way you may not want to be heard. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
you're defending something rather than
Yeah.
offending or being on the
Yeah.
offense. Yeah.
Sure. And so the frame is absolutely important. And then the second thing is this, and this is really critical, especially for finding common ground. Stories beat facts, stories beat data every time. And as a matter of fact, stories beat stories with data in them every time.
Mm.
And
Stories
so
beat stories with data in them every time. Okay.
yes. Yeah. There's a great one of the initial studies done on that was at the University of Michigan in 1980, where they took 120, 130 students and they gave them a story to read from the New Yorker magazine about a woman on welfare in New York City. She was on welfare for 13 years, and she had a new partner and new kid about every year and a half, and she gambled all the time, right? Painted this horrible picture, right? And then the students were given the facts about welfare in New York City, which was most of the people who were on it for 2 years or less. They weren't wasting their money. They were, just trying to build an economic foundation for themselves and using the program to help with that. And then after the students read the story, the intense story, heard the facts, they were asked, what do you think of welfare? And they all had a negative view of it.
Wow.
Even when they were told this story is an outlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think being able to tell really compelling stories within a strong frame is how you do it.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the work that you've done because, boy, you
Sure.
want to talk about seeming David and Goliath. You went up against big tobacco,
Yeah.
which, is there any bigger tsunami than the tobacco industry? Probably oil.
I started that work in 97.
Okay.
And there wasn't a more politically powerful entity on the planet. Just incredibly powerful. And the funny thing is that when I got my first contract to work against the tobacco industry, I remember talking with my business partner at the time, this wonderful woman named Cindy Lewis. I remember talking with her and going, kids, tobacco bad, right? That's the formula. Everybody gets that, right? But when you've got an industry that's willing to spend, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars fighting back, it's easy to lose that message war just because you get overwhelmed in it.
Essentially, you're the Aaron Brockovich of tobacco.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I would not go that far at all. There were a whole lot of Aaron Brockoviches of tobacco out there. I was one of them. But I will tell you, I think that first effort, I was living in Seattle, Washington, and we found a mom named Kathy. And Kathy lived on Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. And she had a son named Jack. And she, every day to drive Jack to his daycare, they would pass a Joe Camel billboard for Camel cigarettes. You remember the old cartoon character?
Absolutely.
Joe
The
Camel.
guy in the kind of film noir look.
Yeah. And so they're driving by it every day. Kathy's not thinking about the billboard at all. But then one day she realizes Jack is learning how to talk. He's learning his first few words. And like any kid, he learns mom, dad, yes, no, and camel.
Wow.
And Kathy's like, we live in Seattle. There aren't any camels in Seattle. Why does my kid know? Why does my little, baby know the word camel? And she figures it out. They would pass that cartoon camel on a billboard. And Jack would point at it, and Kathy, without even thinking about it, would say, oh, that's a camel. Right? And so Kathy got really mad that she was having to deal with this at this age, that the indoctrination was starting at this age. And so she launched a campaign, first of all, to get rid of that billboard.
Okay.
And she called the tobacco companies. They said, we're not taking your call. She called the billboard company. They said, we don't want to talk to you. So then she turned it into a campaign to get rid of all tobacco billboards in King County, Washington. And that's where I got started. And I love that story because what it shows is the power of a mom and a little kid to take on the most powerful industry in the world and win. Right. And so I helped them along with Cindy Lewis. We helped them get rid of tobacco billboards in King County, Washington. Now, thankfully later that became a nationwide thing and there are no more tobacco billboards, but the power of Jack and Kathy to create that change is just amazing to me.
So I'm sitting here thinking back to the class we would have taken together, which I bet was in 94. Did you graduate in 94?
I finished in 94. I technically graduated. No, 90. It would have been 93, I think.
Okay. So you're
Yeah.
a couple of years ahead of me.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think about sitting in class with you, a class I did not take very seriously. And like if someone had said to me, look around in this classroom, the times I was there,
Yeah.
somebody in here is going to do something that has global ramifications. And they're going to do it in 4 years. Or they're going to start it in 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Carter.
I didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming at all, right? And I do really want to be clear because it was a David and Goliath story, but there were 1,000 Goliaths out there, and or 1,000 Davids out there, and I was one of them, right?
Okay.
And I just want to be really clear about that because they were so massive and so powerful, and we had to fight every single day, and the fights were really tough. But what it came down to was we had the stories, right? We ended up telling better stories. So for years, the tobacco industry would give contributions to politicians, and they would tell stories of job loss. If you do this, they'd tell stories of economic tragedy if you do this. And they would tell hopeful stories of we're bringing this many jobs to your community and that kind of thing. But you can't beat Jack and Kathy. You can't beat the story. And we had so many of those stories, both Jack and Kathy on the one end. And then we had people who literally recorded television commercials in their hospital bed in their final weeks, dying because of their smoking. And so at the end of the day, we win those fights because we're persistent and because we have better stories. And it takes decades sometimes to win the fights.
So how do you apply this to life, Carter? That's kind of a big existential question. But I mean, essentially what differentiates us from all the other species in the animal kingdom is that we, at least as far as we know, we have this oral and written tradition of telling stories.
Yeah.
How does this have this universal complexity to it from your experience?
Well, I think we all have stories to tell. That's actually one of the places I start all the time is I think everyone I meet has a story to tell. And I think most stories ultimately say something about our values. And so if we're willing to listen to someone else's story and really listen and think about what values they're showing us in the story, it's a really good starting point. And then we can share a story that shares a little bit of our values. And it may be that our values don't match up. But if it's important enough that we have a relationship, and in politics, it's important enough that you have a relationship with your opponents so that you can find common ground. You keep talking until you find that common value. And I think so often, let me tell you a story about how I came to all of this, right?
Okay.
So I grew up in Minnesota. I was born in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I was born into a family that didn't have a lot of money at all. And so my dad had to take out a bank loan for my birth. My parents didn't have a house. My grandparents, though, had a tiny house on their farm. So the first place I lived was in a tiny house on my grandparents' farm. So we got assistance with the bank loan. We got assistance with the housing. Then my dad took a job as a school teacher in Brainerd, Minnesota, could not find a place that he could afford to live with his new family. So he went to the church and he said, I need recommendations. I got to find some place. I'm a new teacher in town, need a place. And one of the church members stood up and said, I've got a rental house. Come on over and we'll talk about what you can afford. And so we got help through the church, right? And friends and neighbors. Our meat, both sets of grandparents were farmers. We got beef from one side and pork from the other, right? And I remember driving home after Christmas with the front end of our car pointing up in the air because the back end was loaded down with, a side of beef, right?
Yeah.
So we got help there. And later in life, when I was in Seattle, I didn't have health insurance and the state provided me health insurance, right? So we got help from the government at that point. And so the lesson that I take from all of that as I'm growing up is that you got to scrap and you got to ask for help. First lesson. And then the second lesson is that it does take a community coming together for all of us to build the lives we build. And I think it's really important because I think we all struggle, right? We all go through struggles and none of us makes it completely alone. We would like to be the hero of the story and we overcame all of it by ourselves, but we don't. We rely on our friends, our neighbors, the church, and even the government, which is where the community pools resources together to provide assistance, right? And so the lesson I learned there was that there's a shared value that most Americans and most people around the world, I think, share, which is that value of community and coming together and supporting each other. And so when I'm talking to someone that I absolutely disagree with, that I'm not finding any common ground with, I go back to ask them about their story of overcoming a tough time. And it's almost always a story of community, right? It's almost always, and so then we've got a common point. We build community together. We both understand the value of building community. And so I think that's so important. And I think that's an easy way to build common ground, to find common ground with someone, is to ask them a story of overcoming something.
That's really lovely. My very first guest on the podcast was a political commentator and writer named Pete Wehner, who wrote this spectacular book in 2016, 17 called The Death of Politics. And he talked about sort of the same idea, but this notion of if you're really in disagreement with somebody or you come at somebody, and it feels like you're attacking them, the way to work through that is to say, well, tell me about this thing. So he used guns as a great example. Sure. If I'm anti-gun and I come at you and I tell you how bad guns are and you take offense to that, then what you hear me saying is, well, you grew up hunting with your dad and your uncles and your grandpa, and that makes you bad. All the stories, all the goodness, all of the community that you built, all the family lores, all those things, none of that matters because you held a gun, and so you're just bad. Yeah. Well, if I can stop and say, tell me about hunting with your dad and your uncles and your grandpa, blah, 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 suddenly, exactly like you're saying, I can't make a blanket statement anymore. And you feel heard. And
Yeah.
then we might be able to say, okay, but were you using bump stocks when you were hunting with your grandpa? Because that's the problem.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's
Absolutely
where
right.
that common ground piece can be found. So I really love that you're bringing it back to that, because I think that's a drum beat of this podcast that's really important, and perhaps more important for me than any of my audience, because I feel things deeply and I make quick snap decisions. And I just would like it if everybody agreed with me. That would just simplify my
It
life.
would be
And
awesome.
of course, I'm correct. So then what is the
Yes.
disagreement
Right.
about? But if I can remember, and if my guests can keep saying, you know, Dayna, just because we're in disagreement doesn't mean we're wrong. Let's find the place where we can come together. Let's find the place where you loved your grandpa like I loved my grandpa. Okay,
Right.
let's find that as a starting place. That's a really valuable and vital place, because otherwise we are us against them.
Yeah.
And that's the people who are on the other side of our neighbor fence. That's the people on the other side of the political aisle. That's the people in the grocery store. We can't go on like this. We just can't.
Right. And I think it's really important. What you said, people need to feel heard and seen. And today, now that we're into this era of personalization on all these little micro communities, people don't feel like
Yeah,
they're
isn't
being
that
heard.
funny? We're
Yeah.
at one time we are more seen than at any
Right.
other time, because we could just turn our cameras on and you could watch us, boring as
Sure.
that would be, for the rest of our lives. But nobody's seeing it. They might be watching
Right.
it, they're not seeing it.
Yeah. I have a friend from high school who's just wildly successful and has built a good life. And he said to me, you know, I just feel ignored all the time.
Wow.
And so you take that, right? And then he expanded on that. He said, and a lot of people I know feel ignored all the time too. And you know, farmer in southern Minnesota. And he said, because we feel ignored all the time, there's a lot of anger there. And we look for an outlet for that anger. And so if it feels like, we just think the world's not working for us. And so when it comes to politics for him, he's like, blow it up, right? It's not working for me. I don't feel like I've been heard. I don't feel like I've been seen. Let's see what happens if we just blow the whole thing up. And it's not crazy, right? Like that's a very valid thing to say.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I hear that. One of the beautiful things about my career is that I've worked for nonprofits. I spent 26 years working for nonprofits, and I got to meet volunteers from all over the country and around the world. And what all of those volunteers talked about was the fact that being a volunteer for the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids of the American Heart Association gave them a space where they felt seen and heard. And so I think as we apply that to our daily lives and we apply that to finding common ground with people, it makes that idea of not just of asking the question first, right? Tell me about you. Tell me about a time you had to overcome something. Tell me about a time you found great joy in your life. Tell me about a time you felt horrible in your life, right? Tell me a story. Asking that's critical. The second thing is, you got to intently listen.
I was just going to say, I hope you're going to say listen.
Yeah. It's so important. And I think, you know, Dayna, you talked about us reconnecting after all these years. And the first thing I did, actually before we reconnected a little bit, I went back and found your website. Right? And it was great because I didn't get to ask you because we hadn't reconnected at that point. I didn't get to, but you've got stories on there about your life and where you've been and what you've come through. And it felt good just to read those stories. Some of them are
Thank you.
tough as can be, but 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 just amazing to see how you've overcome so much and how you've fought through some tough circumstances, and that as a basis for being able to reconnect with you was amazing.
Thanks. That's
Yeah.
lovely. That's lovely. Um, so what do you want to do next, Carter?
I'm doing some work now, helping some nonprofits with strategic planning, and growing, and doing some of that work. But I'm really interested in, and I love that work. That almost sounded like I didn't love that work. I do love that work. It's a lot of fun and really meaningful. I'm also really interested in the idea of storytelling, and in helping draw out stories from other people, and tell their stories. I think the idea that everyone has a story to tell, I really believe in. And so if I can do some of that, that's kind of a sweet spot for me. And I love hearing other people's stories and helping draw those out.
What's your best story
What's my best story?
or your favorite story?
Well, I called the story of Jack and Kathy.
That's a good
Which
one.
I told that story right up to the point where I got involved. But I actually call that my foundational story of work, because that's really kind of where the career started, and where I learned about the power of that personal story. I think on a really personal level, the story of being a parent and of all the ups and downs with kids. And I could tell a lot of those stories. I've got 2 kids in college. But I think from the idea of finding common ground with people, I have always in my career, I got my first job in politics in 1986. I wasn't even out of high school yet. And in every job I've had, I have engaged the other side. I'm a Democrat. I've engaged the Republican candidate. I've engaged the Republican campaign manager, to establish just a little bit of common ground, even though I wanted to beat them badly, and had some success doing that. I always wanted to make sure that I understood a little bit about them as a person and not just an opponent. And I'm proud of that. I think when I got to Morehead State, as it was called back in the day, I'm really, really proud of the partnership that I formed with a guy named Corey Elmer and his wife Brenda and their friend John Engels. The 3 of them were running the college Republicans. I was working with the college Democrats, and we teamed up on some projects together and found common ground where we could encourage people to be engaged. We could encourage our fellow students to be engaged in the political process. And that ultimately resulted in us offering folks a hayride to the poll. They had moved the polling place off campus, which, the city had done because that way you knock down student voting and student participation. It's kind of a cynical thing to do. We wanted to overcome that. And so we got permission. We ran a hayride to the polls, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And we were able to do it together and have that moment of unity. And that was really fun to do. And politics isn't always about finding common ground. Politics is almost always about division. When I'm running a political campaign, I have one goal and one goal only, and that's to win on election day. Right? And so when you're single-mindedly focused like that, you're not looking for common ground unless it helps you win.
Right.
Right? But once you've been elected, the act of governing should be about finding common ground. Take your position, advocate for it as hard as you can, and come to a solution at the very end to move your agenda forward. And I love both sides of that equation. I love the political side. I love the governing side. even as they have very distinct and sometimes competing endpoints.
So let me ask you about a specific communications moment, because I've never thought about it the
Yeah.
way you just said it, that sometimes you want to find common ground because it's politically advantageous for you.
Sure.
What is your take on that incredible moment? I believe it was in Wisconsin, might have been Michigan, but I think it was in Wisconsin, when the woman stood up to talk to then Senator McCain running for president and said how terrified she was of Barack Obama because he was a Muslim, because he was,
Yeah.
not American born, all that. And he
Yeah.
said, no, ma'am, he is a patriot. He gave that really extraordinary response defending his opponent. And
Yeah.
I have to think at that point, he already knew he had lost. But that's a little beside the point. But at any rate, was that a political move? Was that a human move? Was that both? What was that from your vantage point?
Well, first of all, I'm guessing at that point in the campaign, he didn't know he had lost.
Okay.
I'm guessing that realization for a candidate, you live in such a bubble that
Okay.
realization comes late. So I don't actually, and I think that's more credit to McCain in that case, because what he said in that moment was, I'm going to stand up for what is right. I'm going to tell the truth. And I'm going to do it. And it may be unpopular with my base. Right. And I admired that moment from John McCain.
Me too.
I really did. And I think there is in politics, I think, a line where you just stop doing the political calculus and you just be real, right? And you just say, this is who I am. And you bet on the fact that voters appreciate authenticity. When I saw that moment, and I distinctly remember that moment, it's a great moment. I thought that would boost McCain. Because it
Right.
was
Those sort of
authentically him.
moderate, the people
Right.
who are on the fence might veer that
Yeah.
way.
And we often don't have authenticity in politics. And so I think moments when politicians are authentic, I think can be really compelling moments. If you look at, Hillary's campaign when she broke down at
I
that
was
cafe.
just going to bring that up.
Yeah, in New Hampshire, and was crying. It was authentically Hillary, and I think that was a powerful moment as well. Now, you don't always win, right? Telling the truth in politics doesn't always mean you win, but authenticity in politics sometimes can overcome a lot of division.
So I think that, I'm not saying anything new or illuminating, but I think those two examples are such clear markers of the power of authenticity, because both moments were powerful. Whether you agree with either of those candidates or not, they were powerful, real moments. But one of those people was lifted up generally, and one of those people was scorched.
Yeah.
And I think that's 100% gender based.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that
Well,
is me looking at this from a too harsh a light?
No, I don't. The other example that comes to mind is Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton, right? I mean, Monica just got pummeled,
Excoriated. Yeah.
and in my view, unfairly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I
think-
didn't necessarily think that then. I didn't agree with the way she was treated, but I was not as bothered by it then as I am now. And that bothers me about who I was then.
I would disagree with you on that. As far as who you were then, because I think the messages you were getting
Yeah.
were dehumanizing Monica.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so I think most of us in that moment, and a lot of us still to this day, take the humanity out of Monica in that moment.
And Linda
I don't know
Tripp.
her at all,
I
but-
mean, Linda Tripp did some really lousy stuff, but you know what we know about her? We know that people thought she was mannish.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
she was like Janet Reno. She was
Right.
so her authority and agency was completely negated by how she looked. And
Yeah.
again, I'm not
And
defending Linda Tripp, but
well, that's the other thing, but that gets back to the moment of division we're in today,
mm,
which is as we've been broken into these micro communities online, and as we've been fed these messages of fear from a lot of different sources, what all of those messages of fear do is they otherize people, right? And Democrats do it, Republicans do it. We all do it at some level. I've done it. I'm guessing you've done it at some level, right? We all do it at a certain time. And if you think about finding common ground in this environment, there has to be a moment where there's a breakthrough that gets us to see each other and not otherize each other. I think about the civil rights movement. One of the places I've been and I absolutely love is Birmingham, Alabama. And Birmingham, Alabama, man, the people who survived the civil rights era in Birmingham, Alabama, they went through some stuff. Birmingham's nickname at the time was Bombingham
oh, sure.
because there were so many
So
bombings of
many.
houses.
Yeah. And churches and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But what happened was the leaders of the civil rights movement in Birmingham were just worn out, right? They had been through it. It was violent. It was nasty. There was fear everywhere,
Extended so long.
and had been going on for so long. And the kids stepped up, right? And the authorities in Birmingham turned the dogs and the fire hoses on the kids, and it was captured and put on TV news,
Yeah.
right? And all of a sudden, when you see kids being hit with a fire hose or being attacked by dogs, you can't otherize them. You just can't do it. And so that becomes a critical. There were a number of turning points in the civil rights movement, but that becomes one of the critical turning points in the civil rights movement when people across the United States see that happening.
Northern housewives see it and say,
Yeah.
gosh, those are children like my
Yeah.
children. You can't, you're
Yeah.
right, you can't unsee that.
Right. And part of the challenge that we have today is we no longer have that CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite where we all see the same thing, right?
Yeah.
We're now divided by social media and served up personalized information. And so it's much harder to have a breakthrough moment like that. And there's an active industry of people, when there is a potential breakthrough moment, creating conspiracy theories about that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And so we have to overcome that too. So I don't know how we do that in this technology environment, but those are the kind of moments we need is just moments where we can see each other.
Do you think there's anybody doing it well? Like I'm thinking about a Pete Buttigieg who routinely shows up on Fox News and has those hard conversations. And boy, I've never seen him lose his measured cool. I've never seen him resort, and maybe he has, but I've never seen him resort to minimizing or name calling. He feels, and it's easy because I agree with him, but he feels very measured. He feels very thoughtful. He feels very intellectual, which is appealing to me. So
Sure.
again, not surprising that I find him very much a person who could straddle a number of areas. But are there people you can think of who are doing this even sort of effectively?
Well, I think Pete's really good at it. There's no doubt that he is incredibly good at it. And he does intentionally find forums where he can talk to his political opponents and the people who have different ideas than he has. And I admire that about him. I think a number of Democrats are trying to do that now and find paths. They've seen Pete's example and they're trying to find ways to do that. But I also think, and so from a political perspective, I think that's right on. But I think there's also a kind of just a moral leadership perspective, right? And I think about everyone talking about how much they admired Pope Francis, and and I would guess that if I sat down with Pope Francis, yeah, he and I'd have significant disagreements on some issues, right?
Yeah, he's got a
But
party line to toe, even as he's
yeah,
changing
yeah,
the party line.
right. But what Pope Francis did was he saw people and he let them know that he saw people, right? And so I think there are people outside of politics that maybe sometimes have a moral voice, and can speak to folks, in a much more distinct way.
It's going to be really interesting to see who the next batch of those people are. I mean, you think about
Yeah.
sort of the illustrious greats that we looked up to, they're all gone.
Yeah.
Almost,
Yeah.
you know, Desmond Tutu is still alive.
Sure.
The Dalai Lama is still alive, but a lot of them have moved on. And I feel like there's a kind of gaping opening for some group of people to step in. And it's not maybe she will grow into this, but it's kind of, I don't think it's the Greta Thunbergs of the world, because nobody likes to be scolded to, even if she was admonishing
Yeah.
them in a correct, for the correct idea. Nobody wants to be
Right.
shamed.
Right.
So it's going to be fascinating to see who steps in.
Yeah, no, it really is. And who takes on those mantles of leadership, and how they do it in this media environment, in this technology environment.
You know who I think's doing it better than almost anybody I can imagine?
Who?
President Zelensky.
Yeah, that's a great example.
And let's just keep in mind, he is an actor. I mean, talk about bringing your learned skills and interests to a different stage and stepping in and stepping up. Holy buckets.
Let me offer a completely out of the blue hot take.
Ooh, I would love that.
You are not going to like.
Okay.
But I think for a lot of people in the area that I grew up and in the area that you live, in the Midwest, the upper Midwest, I think they would look at the president and say that he does that for them.
I think so too.
I think, that he is such, for as much as I disagree with him and am greatly concerned, which is a real minimalistic way to put what I feel. He is such an amazing communicator, and he tells stories so well. And if you get past the 30-second soundbite that we all see as we're scrolling, right? If you get past that and you actually watch him interact with people, he knows how to build a community. Now, he only builds one community, right? And he otherizes everyone who he doesn't want in the community, and that's where a lot of the problems come from. But for the community that he builds, he's amazing at building that community. He does it really well. But my biggest problem is, as president, he shouldn't be building just that one community.
Right,
he should be
right.
He should be more focused on the broader.
Boy, you are right. I don't particularly like that, Carter. And I would love to be able to rebut it, but I can't, because I categorically refuse to have his voice enter my head. I don't say his name. So I fully admit often that I am absolutely part of the problem.
Yep.
So I don't say that. I recognize that I am a problem, but what I wanted to say to you is, he tells stories for idiots, and then you fixed it by saying, if you get past the sound bites. I don't get past the sound bites. I don't even pay attention to the sound bites, because they make me want to be homicidal.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and part of politics is you have to understand the opponent, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting. There have been a few stories written about how Trump rallies, how you see the hatred and the fear mongering at Trump rallies, but that they are really, when you get past those sound bites, they're really pretty joyful experiences for the people participating in them, because they feel that they're being seen and they feel like they're part of a community.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is, as I can't understate how worried I am about what the president's doing,
Hmm.
but his ability to build that community is absolutely masterful.
Well, I think the really important piece to what you're saying is he's a both and.
Yeah.
He's dangerous. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see how
Yeah. Yeah.
else you
Yep.
can
No.
catalog him. And part of what makes him dangerous is that he is a Pied Piper.
Yep.
And
That's exactly right.
So regardless of what he's doing, his ability to keep those people who are bought in close and feeling closer is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I get that. I mean, I don't know what Barack Obama would have had to do for me to say, now I'm done with you. And I can intellectually say to you, he didn't do everything right. He made some
Sure.
fairly
Yeah.
substantial mistakes. He's not
He really did.
He didn't have an incredible presidency, unfortunately. But do I love Barack Obama? Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely love
Yeah.
that man. Love
Yep.
the idea of him. Feel like I am part of some movement around him. I mean,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
No, I think you're absolutely right.
Oh, Carter, this is we can't end on that.
Well, all right, I'll give you something else.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the other challenge in finding common ground in the world that we live in today is that we are all overwhelmed by information,
Yes.
right? It's just unbelievable the amount of information coming at us, and it overwhelms us. And so to get back to the idea of what kind of work do I want to do? What do I want to do next in this career? There's a really important step in helping people not feel overwhelmed. And I think Mother Teresa said, she has this quote, she has lots of quotes, but she has this quote that I read recently, and it said, if I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will.
There it is.
And so I think the other piece of finding common ground and bringing people together is to not let yourself focus on things that are too big or that feel too big. None of us are going to solve the problems we're facing as a nation, as a community, and as a world on our own. But we all can play a role in being part of the solution if we focus on what's in front of us and what we can actually do. And so I think, that means different things for everybody. But all of those little steps matter. Jack and Kathy in Seattle going after that one tobacco billboard eventually leads to all tobacco billboards being gone in the United States, eventually leads to smoke-free air laws being passed, eventually leads to tobacco taxes being raised, eventually leads to a lawsuit settlement between the attorney generals. It's a piece of all of those. And it's a piece of the success of all of those. And so I think we all take the step we can take and not worry about trying to do more than that.
That's brave.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
yeah.
to
It really is.
to say, here's the piece that I can take. Here's the way that I can show up, the action I can take.
Yep.
And I don't need to worry about anything else. I'm one domino in a long line of dominoes, and I may see the outcome. I mean, my gosh, Jack's like a 35-year-old today. Wouldn't it be interesting? Wouldn't it be interesting to know, and maybe you do know, what Jack's trajectory has been? He likely has, I mean, he's got I've heard the stories experience of what he did, but he has no idea what he did. And really what he did was forgettably small, except it changed the world.
Right. And I think that it's important to take that step. And then the second thing that's really important is to find the other people around you that are also taking their step.
Yeah.
So you can share that experience, right? You could share the stories of taking that step. And if we do that, and if we share our stories with each other, and build a little community, for ourselves, then all of a sudden the whole thing doesn't feel like it's crashing down on us quite as much. We feel like we've done a piece to help alleviate all of that.
That's a much nicer place to stop, a much more hopeful place to stop, and a beautiful admonition to all of us to just do our part. That's all we can do. So do our part. We're privileged, even in the chaos, to be here in this moment, in this time. And so do your part.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And I think that's where, and it's important to do our part, but also to be together and talk together about doing our part, right? Finding those people. And if you do that, it really does help lift some of the weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Carter, I have loved this conversation, and I trust that this is the beginning of a reconnection for the second half of our lives, not okay, I'll talk to you in 30 years when I bump into you again randomly. Introduction
no,
to this.
We will definitely stay in touch. It's been great fun being reconnected with you. It's been great fun having this discussion with you. I think you're leading a series of very important discussions, and so I'm just happy to get to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and insight, and everyone else. We will talk very soon. Thanks for joining me on Brave Middle Ground. I hope today's conversation inspired you to embrace the power of the in-between and take steps toward deeper connection and understanding. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Your support grows our community and keeps these meaningful conversations going. For more information on Brave Middle Ground and everything else I'm working on, go to daynadelval.com. Brave Middle Ground is mixed by Sound Advice, and our music is by Quinn Del Val. Until next time, I'm Dayna Del Val. Stay curious, stay courageous, and stay connected.